Your hosts have earned a reputation as fierce and effective advocates inside and outside of the courtroom. Our partners are experienced trial attorneys who have been board certified in family law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization.
Thanks for tuning into For Better, Worse, or Divorce podcast. This is the podcast where we provide you tips and insight how to navigate divorce and child custody situations. So I'm Jake Gilbreath. I'm one of the founding partners of Walters Gilbreath. And today I am joined by a special guest, Michelle Smith. Michelle is a certified divorce financial analyst. She's a financial advisor, and she's the managing partner at Savant Wealth Management. She's also the founder of Wife to CFO. So it's Wife and the number 2 CFO, a platform dedicated to helping women become confident in their financial decisions and becoming confident financial decision makers. So Michelle specializes in guiding high net worth women through both the emotional and financial complexities of a divorce. So we're very excited to have Michelle. I appreciate her taking the time. So Michelle, say hi to everybody, please.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jake. I love your podcast.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I love all your stuff. Your background and your resume is a mouthful. So I'm going to, like in good lawyer fashion, start very broad like I would in court. Tell me about yourself and what you do.
I have expert witness PTSD right now, Jake. Recovering expert witness. So I followed my mom into Wall Street. And that was a result of her going through a second divorce when I was a teenager and my brother was a teenager. And once again, no money. And my mom went to Wall Street and went to work for Merrill Lynch and made it her mission to educate women about what can happen if you have given up the steering wheel on your money. And 10 years into that career with her, I started getting more and more women in my office with divorce settlements. And when I started asking just really basic questions, not like deposing them, just trying to understand how they arrived at this or that, or they couldn't answer it. And this is women that might have spent $250,000 litigating and 2 years in the process, maybe a trial. And it was like they were in a similar money coma that they were in during the marriage, during the divorce. And so I went and I sat in divorce court one entire summer every Friday to understand what was going on in this process. And when I saw that there really wasn't a personal financial advisor in the process, there were mostly forensic accountants, business valuation experts, and they were testifying as to what rate of return a woman in her 50s with no income could earn on a portfolio, but they never managed $1 of money. I made it my business to get to know the administrative judge, get to know all the divorce lawyers, and then found out about the CDFA designation. And it was really just, that's when it all turned. And my mission was to take women who were not in control of their money and turn them to CFOs in the divorce process and after.
Wife to CFO, right? So tell me about kind of where you're based, and are you doing this kind of nationwide? How do people find you? Tell me a little about your business before we talk about it.
Yeah, so I am based in New York City, but I am part of Savant Wealth Management as a managing director and financial advisor. And you can go to savantwealthmanagement.com and find Wife to CFO and all other kinds of good stuff there. But I am based in New York City.
Yeah, we'll make sure that that we have the links and everything for everybody.
Hey, money doesn't have a zip code, right?
Yeah,
money doesn't have a zip code, so I can talk to anybody.
Well, and that's helpful because, it's, sometimes we get in this rabbit, kind of almost like blinders on, right? Of like, these are the people I work with in my jurisdiction, and this, and that. And obviously, for divorce, in law and litigation in general, there's, we practice in certain areas. So the lawyers can't, I, for example, am only licensed in the state of Texas. I can't practice in New York City. But like you were saying, I mean, divorce, the financial impact and the need to understand the financial impact in your finances, that's nationwide, worldwide, really.
It's worldwide.
Loop back to a point that you made after we go through some background, but just the point that you made as far as, the professionals that are involved and stuff. Because I do think, and I want to talk about this more in a bit, I do think I've seen as a professional, and a lot of times, if we're going to say, just like you're talking about with your practice, focusing on women, a lot of times with wives and stuff, I still, even as we sit here in 2026, and no matter what jurisdiction, I still see kind of the attitude of, when you have a wife, for example, that doesn't know information or doesn't just have the background and stuff, I still see a little bit of that attitude of like, don't worry, little lady, frankly, the men will take care of this, right? Like, we'll let you know what you need and we'll go get you what you want. And then, you sit there in the back and the men will handle this. Even if it's not necessarily a man doing it, there does seem to be that attitude. So actually, let's just jump right to it. And then, there does seem to be that attitude still, even in my practice.
It is the attitude still. And it's also the biggest mistake women make in their divorce process. Because if you had no visibility, right? No transparency. Maybe you didn't even want to. Maybe you weren't allowed to. Like, there's all kinds of reasons. It might have been just a very conscious agreement that you were going to do CEO of the house and kids. He was going to do money, right? That's cool. But like, if you didn't have visibility and transparency, and then you walk into your divorce lawyer's office and it's a man and it's a strong male, and you think that they're going to make sure that you're financially educated. Like, you have to explain the law. You have to do legal strategy. You have to figure out this economic fact pattern and what you can and can't done based upon, standard operating outcomes in your zip code and case law and whatnot. And women just think that, first of all, that their lawyers are magicians, and you're not. You can't create money if there isn't there. You've got to get them through the legal process. It is a lawsuit, and you can't financially educate them, especially if you're not a financial expert. And so women need to understand that they need to, it might be the worst time for you to become financially educated when you're also learning literally some Latin words in your divorce. There's Latin still being used in the divorce process, right? So you got to learn a whole new jargon legally. You got to understand your money. And if you don't really take that pause to find someone that can advise you financially and educate you during the process, and I don't mean garden variety financial advice, because that can hurt you if somebody says, well, she needs $5 million. What if there's not $5 million there to split, right? And so it is imperative that you do not stay in a money coma during your divorce if you were in one during the marriage, because you will never understand your settlement options, how to choose, and you will also not trust if your lawyer's saying this is a good deal, you should take it. You're not going to trust that if you don't know why.
Right. Talk to me a little bit, and then I want to circle back to that. But, people, you made this point, right? People come to us, and sometimes it's for nefarious reasons that one spouse is controlling all the finances, say he's purposely being, deceitful or hiding information. Sometimes it's a sexist, construct that people have in their relationship. I mean, frankly, I see that, right? I'm the man, I'm in charge of finances. You're the woman, you're in charge of kids. You don't talk to me about finances, I don't talk to you about kids. You see that extreme still. Sometimes it's like, that's just the deal of how people set up their finances, and it's not nefarious, and they just don't know. I mean, I don't, my personal marriage, I've said this in the podcast, I don't understand it, right? If I went home and I told my wife, who's my partner, my equal partner, said, hey, all my money's going in an account and you're not going to see it. And that's, I may be reaching out to my law partner, Brian, said, I need your help. And that's not my marriage, but some people are like that. And that's just the deal. But so talk to me about kind of, I mean, do you see that? What do you see in your practice? It doesn't really matter. I mean, at the end of the day, if I don't have the information, I don't have the information.
Oh, you need the information in a lawsuit. You may have been able, if your marriage operated like that, and a lot of them still do, right? This is more common than it's not. And so when women show up in my Zoom room or in my office and say, I'm so embarrassed, I'm so ashamed, I'm sure money's hidden. Well, hidden is interesting because hidden can mean just not visible. Okay, maybe your name's not on it, but we're going to find it and we're going to split it, right? It's still there that if you had this agreement, whether it was voluntary or involuntary in your marriage, you don't have a choice but to understand it and unravel it in your divorce. You do not have a choice. You cannot blindly sign a tax return. You cannot come out of the gates and be so certain that money is hidden that you're willing to spend $50,000 on forensic tracing, which might yield absolutely nothing, but make you feel better. You just have to start unraveling your financial disclosure one number at a time. You have to understand what your life costs, not a spreadsheet he made at 1 a.m. It is not hard to back into what life costs. And as you know, that is the basis of almost everything. Your financial disclosures, what you say your budget is, you got to get that right. You can't edit that monthly and say, whoops, I forgot. Certainly not in court, right? So you've got to, at the base level, just knowing what life costs, because assets and income need to produce that, you've got to understand what it costs. And it's the easiest number to get to.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Back to your point too about, I like the word unraveling. I like you using that because I can't tell you how many consults I've sat, I've conducted, and I can't imagine how anxiety producing it is on the other side when somebody comes to me and we're talking through the consult and the process, and what everybody wants to know, understandably, is like, hey, what's the end of this look like? What am I going to get? And when you have the spouse that doesn't know, I mean, the consult's very hard because you're sitting there going like, I don't know, right? Y'all may have, I'm looking at your lifestyle, but I can't, lifestyle, this, right? Lifestyle does not necessarily translate to what people have. I see people that have a very humble life, humble, maybe not the right word, a very modest lifestyle, and they've got $20 million in the bank, right? And I see people that live where you see the people in the expensive zip codes with a $10 million house, and they come in and we owe $500,000 on our Amex, everything's leaned up, and, it's a house of cards. And I can't imagine, right, just seeing it through a console and a lawyer going, you're about to go through the most difficult process in your life, one of the most difficult, maybe the most difficult things in life. And you're probably terrified, right? You have no idea what your financial situation is going to look like. And I don't know. I can't tell you what your business is worth. I can't tell you what you have in the bank, anything like that. And it is it's a daunting task, right? To, like you said, unravel that.
Well, it's a terrifying moment. Truly, they're terrified. And they're also maybe for the first time getting that they might not have their kids every other weekend. They may have a 1 week on, 1 week off. They're petrified of what that's going to do to the kids. And now, by the way, let's drink water out of a financial fire hose. And you got to start understanding the hedge fund and private equity and your investment accounts and what kind of settlement, that's why our job, right? You and I have a job, and it's to calm it down. And calming it down means getting information, meeting these women where they are, stripping the jargon, explaining the process, and assuring them that there are people like me, there are people like you that are going to go through this a step at a time and not make them feel ashamed. And, I always say, I don't want to hear any woman, I want every woman in America to stop saying in the little girl voice, I have a really stupid question. No, you do not have a stupid question. You need a clarifying answer. And if you don't understand it 1, 2, 3, 12 times, you just have to keep asking, can you explain that differently? I don't get it. That's nothing to be ashamed about.
That's absolutely right.
Many fathers don't know the name of their kids' pediatricians. They're not ashamed.
Right. And we don't glare at them and we don't tell them, that you're not entitled, we're not going to explain this to you, go in the corner, the adults will figure this out.
Yeah.
How many times have you seen, and then what do you do with it? Let's just say a woman come to you, a wife comes to you and said, well, I don't know what the finances are. I don't know what my husband's business is worth, but he's made this offer to me. And he said, if I don't take it, it's only going to get worse.
Oh boy, that's the best bully move out of the gate. And I actually know when that's happening that there's a real opportunity to help her not negotiate over her kitchen table. Look, I am a trained mediator as well. I believe that people should try to come to their own agreement, but not manipulatively, not, we don't need lawyers. They don't care about us. I'd rather send our kids to college than pay the lawyer money. This one's stupid. That one's stupid. Nobody knows what they're talking about. Nobody's going to figure out our complex financial life. I'm going to take care of you. Don't you worry. I will take care of you. Oh, and here is a spreadsheet that shows you just how okay you're going to be. There may be a point in the process, and often there is, where that direct conversation between husband and wife should happen, but certainly not without complete eyes wide open, financial awareness, understanding, because those manipulative moments that he may try to bully you, that is, you have a team behind you. We promise you we're going to do what we can to protect you. You just have to find your sentences and find your strength in that moment to not be bullied and to not take that bait without advice.
Well, and it's the whole like, don't trust your lawyer, trust me, right? They're just trying to take your money. I'm just trying to look out for you. And I'll say, kind of, being on both sides, right? Representing husbands and wives and, people in different situations. It can be just no different than people coming to me and they don't have any information about their estate. That sort of conversation of like, hey, well, let's just do it without lawyers and just trust me, it's a good deal. That can be nefarious. That can be just naivety, right? On say in this situation, the husband's part, right? Nefarious, one of the largest, most on the nose fraud cases I've ever had in my career started with the husband saying, let's not get lawyers. I don't have a lawyer. He did. I don't have a lawyer. You don't need a lawyer. Let's just go to mediation. Here's, just like you said, here's the spreadsheet. Which, by the way, is missing over $100 million. There's the spreadsheet. Here we go.
It was a mistake, Jake.
Right? Yeah, it's just a mistake. I'm just looking out for my wife, and these lawyers are just trying to take your money, right? That's nefarious. I do see, too, sometimes where it's just like, and let me say it from the husband's perspective, frankly, when the husband comes in, it's like, hey, I know what my business is worth. I know what's, I can show her what's in the brokerage account. This is like, I just want to be done. I will give her such a good deal. And he really does think he's doing that. And when I always tell the husbands in that situation, it's like, well, hey man, maybe, but we don't know. And in fairness to her, trust isn't super high right now. Y'all are going through a divorce. So don't get all pissed off when she wants to know when her lawyer wants to know what the finances are and wants to go value your business. I know you're telling me that you don't want to go through that. I know you're telling me, why do we have to? Can't she just take the deal? I know you're telling me this is only going to get it worse for her. I know you're telling me all that. But seriously, y'all don't trust each other right now. And we have to have disclosure on both sides. And I do think it's the lawyer's job, representing both the nefarious person and the person that's just naive, just going, it's going to be controversial. A woman coming in and saying, I want to understand and have information is not supposed to be controversial. But as you know, sometimes it's very controversial, particularly when you're married to a narcissist or somebody with some type of personality.
Look, it's still the common dynamic, right? So of course that's going to feel jarring. Of course and by the way, both people in a divorce ultimately want to know one thing at the end of it. Am I going to be okay? That's gender neutral. Am I going to be okay is sort of a given for life, right? Am I going to be financially okay? And so, to me, so many women were asking me what book they could read, what course they could take. Where's my crash course in money? There is, that's why I created Wife to CFO. It hit me that this is a really big gap in the process, and people are speaking a foreign language. Some Latin words are being used in the process. They've never dealt with the money. And, this is not a time to pat her on the back and say, I've got this, sweetheart. This is sit down with someone like me who's going to patiently go through this number by number, asset by asset, and explain the pros and the cons of keeping it, getting half of it, or giving it up, right? That's all it comes down to. What is the package of stuff you need to fund the cost of your life? Does that match what's available in the marriage to be split? Is the income from the marriage, right? Will that cover your lifestyle? If you come in with a pile of debt, you were overspending, right? If your number is right within what he makes, what the marriage makes, what the income is in total, then that can be worked with. But you have to know that number first. You have to not just give away all the private equity funds and say, oh, I don't understand them anyway. He runs them. And, he often says, well, they're not worth anything. No, they're not worth anything until something IPOs, right? And so it's going through, women think that, especially high net worth, these complex balance sheets, nobody will possibly ever understand. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. And by the way, so are you. In a few months, you're going to understand. So that now when you're sitting with your lawyer and Jake is saying, hey, there may be risks to keeping half of this, but you're aware of them. And you've got this over here that'll be able to support you while you're waiting for this to have value. So it really is that simple. It's not as hard. And this kind of information and financial strategy, and certainly when I can work with good lawyers like you, like this is a positive outcome to have an educated client who is not second guessing you, listening to her father, listening to her friend down the street who has a completely different balance sheet than she does, right? The friend's advice is my favorite. My friend got this. Really? Well, what was in her Rubik's Cube? What? I don't know, right? But that, depending on that outside advice, also tells me she's not confident yet in her decision making. She's listening to anybody else who's saying something because she's scared she missed something. And I'm on this planet to eradicate that. And for women to be like on their toes, not their heels in this process, work productively with lawyers like you so we can just calm the whole thing down.
Well, because ultimately it's your point, right? As far as what the lawyer's role is and kind of what your role is. And I have this conversation a lot with clients. I have this conversation a lot with women going through high net divorces. It's like when they ask me like, well, how am I going to live with this? And how am I going to live with that? I mean, I can say general stuff. I can say, cash is king. You got to think about down payments on a house, stuff like that. But ultimately, I tell people all the time, I have a very limited role in your life, right? Like my role is to go get you the most I can get you, right? That's my role. What you do with that and how you do, but that it's complex, right? What you do with that, I don't really have a role in. Like you were saying, it's not just lawyers get so obsessed. I'm sure you see this all the time when we have these property division. I could talk another 30 minutes on this, but lawyers get so obsessed when you have this complex property division. It's different types of assets. You got brokerage accounts, you got investments. Maybe you have some investments in some startups. You have options. You have real estate. Whatever, small business. And lawyers get so obsessed with, I have to get X percentage of the community estate. That's my only job. I got my client 52% of a $15 million estate. I'm a good lawyer. And it's like, well, which assets, right?
52% of what?
Right. My boss who trained me, Jim Piper, who has been on the podcast and he's retired, but he's still at the firm. I mean, Jim used to always say, the other side, you can pick the percentage of the division of the estate. I get to pick the numbers on the spreadsheet, right? Like that's so different. And lawyers just stop. I see that when I serve as a mediator. I see that with people in courts, like I have to get X percentage, and they have zero discussion with their client of like, I just got you 52% of the estate. And then you look at the spreadsheet, it's like, you just got me a $6 million house that I can't afford, even if it was paid for completely in $200,000 in cash and some carried interest that hopefully they may hit someday, but they could crash and burn. What am I going to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite pet peeve, can I share it?
Absolutely.
This phantom, imaginary standard of imputed income on assets. Really? Really? That's what got me when I sat in court. watching this 5% number, 5% imputed. And when I saw that this was all predicated on rates of return, which, yeah, you can look at the market historically and there's an average return, but the way you experience that average return, if you got your divorce settlement in the year 2000, which was, by the way, 10 years in the stock market, earned basically nothing. It's known as the lost decade for stocks. You had a very different experience if you got your $5 million in January of 2000 than if you got it in January of 2010. So when I saw that the rate of withdrawal wasn't being discussed based on a woman's age, especially if the argument was being made that she didn't need spousal support because she had enough in assets to support herself at a 5% guaranteed, I was like, whoa. I got to introduce the sustainable rate of withdrawal, knowing that returns are unpredictable. I mean, I'm still looking for that crystal ball to see what the market's going to do this year, right? We'd all love it. It's not there. So you have to, when I saw that sort of personal financial advising piece was missing, that's really when it hit me why there's like just so much fear and confusion in this process for women. And there's some standards that are just, they're in place because really before people like me, there weren't personal financial advisors in the process that understood divorce because, right, I also can't come to you with work product on behalf of a woman, which would never happen in your zip code. You have to be very responsible as a financial advisor to understand the sandbox you're playing in.
It's such a balance, right? Because I do see financial advisors on the other extreme. I do see people like you that are come through and are very helpful and practical and like, hey, this is what y'all got, right? So this is what we got to play with. And then, I do see, and I'm sure this drives you nuts, I see financial advisors come in, client brings in a financial advisor, and they come in and go, my client needs $40,000 a month to live. Like, okay, well, we're dividing up a $1.5 million estate. And there's no alimony in this case. Like, well, that's what she needs. She needs $40,000 a month. Go figure it out. And that's not helpful either.
Oh, that is so dangerous because that is also anchoring someone who doesn't know enough about her money yet to anything under that. She may feel screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it really is. You have to be very responsible. As a financial professional in this process, you have to be very responsible to know, okay, that's might have been what you're spending, but now let's see, are there liabilities that finance that? Look, best case scenario, and often it can all work out, right? The divorces all work out, don't they, Jake? They all work out. And I even if like I hate certain words in finance because they cause fear, right? Downsizing is really ugly to use. How about right sizing? Right? Budget feels like diet. It feels restrictive. No, it's just what's the cost of your life? What does it cost? Right?
Well,
we'll get there.
We're dating you too, right? It's like we just sit there and go, and it goes back to this little lady of like, can you believe she spends X dollars a month? She needs to tighten her budget. She needs to downsize. She needs to whatever, right? It does seem like we're talking down to, again, the person who's been the CFO of the household, and then we're talking down to her like she's the problem.
And it's also interesting. I also see the other side of the coin. I see women that are in the room with me where there's $20 million in investments to divvy up, and she's going to get 10. But when she's doing her cost of life with me for the financial disclosures, she's trying to pare it down because she's afraid it's going to be judged or the number she's asking for is going to piss him off. And right, that's the moment where I say, listen, let's like neutralize this. Let's sterilize this. The cost of your life is the cost of your life is the cost of your life. We are putting it on paper. We are testing it against your economics and these financial disclosures. And do not cut your expenses out of the gate because you're afraid he's going to be pissed. Like he knows if he's writing the checks, he sees the credit card bills. Why are we ashamed in this moment and that is bad. Because then if we're working off a false number that's lower because she feels like that's going to be less acrimonious and confrontational, you're not going to get what you need and the money's available. So it cuts both ways. I see both.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, talk to me about just our practical advice. You've talked a little bit about team building, not falling for this. Again, either it's a trick or it's just naivety of this, get me out of here. Just he's offered me this and it's an amazing deal. What's some practical advice that, women, I guess first talk, when do you like to get involved in the process? I assume at the beginning, but talk to me about that. And then just some practical advice that people can have.
The sooner someone like me is involved, the better. You also, the practical advice I give also is like, you don't have to know everything right now. We just have to unravel it and teach you as you go along. And your own money is your best teacher. A book that's talking about things that have nothing to do with you, great. You might learn personal finance, but do you need to learn debt management if you don't have debt? You do not. So you just have to start where you are. You have to bring people into this process. If you need psychological coaching because you're so traumatized that you're not going to have your kids every other weekend, but he's their father and he's allowed to have them, presumably, right? You need somebody to help you through that piece. You need somebody to help you through the financial piece. And, you have to give yourself permission in this moment. Like, no, you cannot put your emotions aside. You cannot. It's all in the pot, but you can't make business decisions too fast in those moments. And you certainly can't make them if you are on shaky financial knowledge ground. So my best practical advice is give yourself a break. You are learning this. This is probably the largest personal financial transaction of your life. And yes, divorce has a process and you can't take 10 years to say yes to things, but you also don't have to say yes by 1 a.m, right? You have to give yourself permission to ask questions, to ask for clarification, to say, I'm sorry, I still don't understand that. What does that mean? How does it affect me? When women also say things to me like, but I don't even know what questions to ask, I say, your best question is 3 letters. Why? Why are you recommending that? Why is the value different? Why does the tax return? Why? You can just ask why. You don't have to have a PhD type thesis of questions to ask. Why is sufficient? Why? Because I don't understand.
Yeah. Literally what I was going to say, right, is ask questions, right? And don't feel ashamed of it. I'm like you. I hate it when people say, well, I've got a dumb question. Like, there's no dumb question, right? I hate it when people say, I'm going to ask the same thing again. Yeah, you want to ask the same thing over and over again. And I think, and I'll end with this, I think you've made this point throughout. I'd make the point is find a team that talks to you like you're an adult, right? Find the teams like, I tell people all the time, when it comes to the legal side, sounds like you're the same on the financial side, is like, I'm going to vomit information on you, right? And I promise you, you're going to retain 5% of it at most. And that's totally fine, right? But I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to talk to you like you're an adult. No different than if I go to the doctor, I want her telling me what she's doing, what procedure she's doing, why she's doing it. I'm not asking that because I'm doing the operation on myself, right? I'm asking that because I want to be able to make informed decisions.
And right, I tell these women all the time, and I'm going to say it to the women listening, you are not behind. You're building a new skill set. You're not behind. There's nothing to be ashamed of. You're building, you're learning, it's okay, right? And to have people say to you in this process, we discussed that at the first meeting. We went over that, which prohibits them from asking their lawyers again. That's like telling somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's, don't you remember? We talked about that. Like, it's not fair. You're in a lawyer's office maybe for the first time in your life on your own. And your kids are involved and your life savings. Of course, you're not going to retain it. It's like, that study they say if you have to tell somebody that they're fired, you just have to say you're fired because their brain's going to shut down in about 7 seconds, right? They're frozen. And so you're not behind. You're building a new skill set. You ask as many questions as you want. They do not have to be genius. They do not have to be brilliant. They are not dumb. Just ask why. Why is this being recommended? Why do you think this is a good settlement? Why? That's it.
Yep. That's a great place to end. You and I'm sure, could talk for hours and hours. Again, for everybody listening, please find Michelle, read her stuff, find her on the internet. We'll put her information, the contact information. She's got tons that she can offer for those going through these divorces. So, Michelle, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
It's a lot of fun.
And I hope we're helping people.
That's the goal, right?
That's
Help
the goal.
People and talk to people like they're adults. So that's what we'll end with today. So for those listening, if you liked what you've heard, please do us a favor and leave a review. We appreciate all the feedback we get, especially when it helps us better the podcast. If you have any questions for Michelle or interested in reaching out to her directly, we'll have her contact information in the show notes. If y'all couldn't have anything that you want to reach out to the law firm about, you can find us at waltersgilbreath.com. We appreciate everybody listening. And I'm Jake Gilbreath, joined by Michelle Smith, and we'll join y'all next time.
For information about the topics covered in today's episode and more, you can visit our website at waltersgilbreath.com. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of For Better, Worse, or Divorce, where we post new episodes every first Wednesday. Do you have a topic you want discussed or a question for our hosts? Email us at podcast@waltersgilbreath.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time.